I am so grateful for our friends at Blue Microphones. Not only have they completely changed what our show sounds like, they've given me headphones so I can monitor things better. This is the mic for millions of creative people, and now I know why. I'm so grateful for them completely changing the quality of our audio. You'll find Blue mics like Yeti and the Mouse, which we're using here, both in pro studios and home studios, literally all over the world. Their popular Yeti caster is a Blue Yeti microphone, plus a boom arm system that's behind many of your favorite podcasts. I run into them all the time, and now I know why. If you've ever thought about creating your own podcast or YouTube channel, Blue can make you sound and look great. Just visit bluemic.com and click Get Started, and you can start telling your story. As we're gradually moving back to opening schools and businesses and, of course, our in-person interactions, I want to remind you, this is all time with cold and flu season getting going. Staying hydrated is key to helping your body deal with the added stress and with the upcoming flu season. My regular fans have heard me talk about a product called Hydrolite for a long time now. It's an amazing rapid rehydration drink. It's a mix that, well, we're obsessed with here. I'm excited to announce they've just released Hydrolite Plus Immunity, just in time for cold and flu season. Hydrolite Plus Immunity starts with their fast-absorbing electrolytes and adds a host of immune-boosting ingredients. Each single-serve, easy-pour drink mix contains 1,000 milligrams of vitamin C and 300 milligrams of elderberry extract, creates what is hopefully immune-boosting formula that's high in antioxidants and zinc. Combining this with Hydrolite's 7 key electrolytes, it's a fantastic way to stay proactive and properly hydrated. Hydrolite Plus Immunity comes in convenient, easy-to-pour powder sticks that rapidly dissolve in water and make a great tasting drink that has 75% less sugar than your typical sports drink. It uses all natural flavors, and it is gluten-free, dairy-free, caffeine-free, non-GMO, and it is vegan. And you can find Hydrolite Plus by visiting hydrolite.com/Dr. Drew. Again, that's HYDRALYTE.com/DRDRW. And be sure to use our code Dr. Drew 25 at checkout for a special discount.
Hey everyone, it's a dose of Dr. Drew.
Yes, indeed. Here we are. I want to thank our friends at Halodyne, which I continue to spray in my throat and nose for travel, knock out those viruses and pathogens. And I understand I had COVID, but there's still plenty of other things out there that can get on you. And so I am...
Use code Dr. Drew at checkout.
I am a UVC advocate. I have been completely converted. We actually got Anthony Brown a UVC unit to use at his hospital.
Yes, we did. Also, if you can see here, we have all the, if you guys need your codes and you don't want to sift around through the show, I put them all up here at the front so you can go back and find the codes if you're ready to buy.
Oh, they're all different codes, aren't they?
Yeah, we got to do something about that. I think it should be the same one. Yeah?
Yeah. I bought some seed and I forgot to use the code.
Here's Anthony next to his
yeah, there it is.
I won. They're very happy with it, apparently.
It's extremely effective. I mean, listen, it's a good way to help add to the decrease the pathogen load in the environment. That's all I'm saying.
I wonder what the rest of that. Oh, well, anyways.
What's the matter?
Okay.
All right, so just quick review here, everybody. Something weird has happened with one of the Moderna vaccines in California, or at least I think it was in California, but they've certainly taken one batch out of circulation, which is something like 300,000 vaccines, I'm hearing, which is something we cannot afford here in California because we are doing a woeful job. We just released for 65 plus, Susan. Did you see that email I sent you?
But I clicked on the link and it didn't go anywhere.
But this is the problem with this whole thing, is that they're just doing
Caleb Nation.
A piss poor job of getting the vaccine out. 65 plus is the group that needs to get vaccinated.
Caleb Nation needs to do their website.
I'm just saying the 65 plus group is the one I've been worried about from the beginning, and particularly the ones with much life ahead of them who are ambulatory and out in the world. Those are the ones that can get this thing. And the risk of the vaccine is nothing compared to the risk of the virus. The risk of the vaccine, nothing compared to the risk of the virus if you're in a risk category. And there's a lot of talk about the mortality associated with this thing, but keep in mind the morbidity. I'm living in proof of the morbidity of this thing. It kicks your ass pretty good. If you have a moderate or severe case. So we want to take the vaccines and we want to get this thing under control once and for all. And it should be, do not pass go, do not collect $200, get this thing distributed as quickly as possible. I will be, as I've said, I'll be doing my Addict score on a regular basis. Christina P., who I do After Dark with, wants to check hers as well. We are both going to take the vaccine at the point at which our immunity starts to wane. I think that's a very sophisticated way to do this, and I don't want to take a vaccine that should be going to someone else in the meantime. Whether or not some of these mutations are going to affect us, not so far. Just understand that when the R naught of a virus exceeds that of the previous virus, the one that's more infectious will take over. So that virus is going to take over, be the predominant virus. It does not appear to be more virulent, and it does not appear to be less or able to get around the vaccine or the immunity if you've had the virus before. Now, there are some mutations coming that are a little more concerning that way. I will tell you that when you've had the virus, you react to multiple proteins, not just the spike protein, which is what the vaccine is directed at. So in a way, the immunity from having had the virus is better in a sense in terms of possible mutations coming our way. But again, it's not as long lasting as the vaccine is. So we'll see. We'll see how things play out. But the numbers, basically, I want you to know, in the United States, are getting better fast. California particularly, I mean, we almost collapsed in terms of number of cases. We're down to 23,000, death rate down at 140, hospitalization rate dropping off a cliff. And the U.S. data is looking very similarly correcting downward. So it looks as though for the moment, if we stay the course, again, only the virus knows for sure, we're going to be in pretty good shape here in a couple of weeks. But it's going to be a couple of weeks of still, struggling along here, and let's get that vaccine in the meantime. So with all that said, I'm going to leave the topic of COVID happily because it's all I've been thinking. I come in on a month on Thursday, a month of, so I'm technically a long hauler, even though my symptoms are mild. I'm not in the chronic COVID category, but I'm in the long hauler category. You guys all saw the stream we did on Friday about fluvoxamine. I discussed it with my doctor. We thought if in any way deteriorating by today or not improving today, I would consider using it. I probably would use it, but I'm improving every day. So I think, how much better than well can I do, right? I don't really want to mess with that. Let me introduce my guest. It is Dr. Michael Shermer, founding publisher of Skeptic Magazine. It's a Scientific American regular contributor to Time, presidential fellow at Chapman University, the Skeptics Society, a scientific and educational organization, mission to engage experts in investigating paranormal, fringe science, pseudoscience, all the above. And his most recent article is QAnon in Conspiratorial Context. His book is Giving the Devil His Due. There it is. And his training, graduate training, is history of science and experimental psychology. Dr. Shermer was kindly on my Fox 11 program, and I said, I need to talk to him some more. And you've kindly showed up, so I appreciate you coming in. So,
well, I'm not going anywhere like everybody else. I'm stuck at home, so here we go.
Let's do it. Let's start with the book. What is Giving the Devil His Due about, and what's the thesis there?
Oh, right. Well, so it's a defense of free speech. It's a collection of my essays, mostly focused on a defense of freedom of speech, and not just public, as in the government can't silence you, but also private. I think it's a big mistake for private companies to begin censoring people. It sets a bad precedence, and that was what happened in the case of the challenges to the First Amendment in the famous case in 1919, Schenck versus the United States. I'll read you the famous portion from Judge Oliver Wendell Holmes's decision. And here it is. This is your listeners will know these lines quite well. The most stringent protection of free speech would not protect a man falsely shouting fire in a theater and causing a panic. The question in every case is whether the words used are used in such circumstances and are of such a nature as to create a clear and present danger that they will bring about the substantive evils that Congress has a right to prevent. Okay, what were these? What was this clear and present danger? It was a group of socialists in Philadelphia, this guy Charles Schenck, who was distributing leaflets against the draft in the First World War, arguing that the draft is a violation of the 13th Amendment, which protects you from slavery or the government controlling your body, which essentially the draft is. So it's an argument that would seem on the surface to us now kind of reasonable to make. At least it's a debatable point. But for this, he was locked up and charged with sedition and endangering the United States. And that's the problem once you decide, like, I think that speech right there is a threat to our nation. Then the basket of words that could be put in there grows and grows and grows. And as we know, whoever's in power, doesn't want to lose power and wants to control as much as they can. And so silencing people is the first step down the road toward tyranny. So that's why I think we have to draw the line there and err on the side of let people have their say, including Trump. I know if I was the CEO of Twitter, maybe I would have made the same decision Jack made, but I think it's a mistake. It's good to know what people are thinking and what they're planning, and then we can do something about it. But the moment you decide we're going to silence some speech, then where do you draw the line? And that becomes very difficult.
Right. And we're clearly going down a path. Well, I mean, it's an observation that Alexis de Tocqueville made in 1829, which was that although we had the highest level of granted privileges of free speech by the government, he actually rightly deduced that the actual practice of free speech in America was probably worse than other countries because of the social pressure of the public square. He said that you actually couldn't get up and do things because people wouldn't let you, even though you were granted that privilege by the government.
Right. Well, sure. I mean, we all self-censor in a way. You don't just walk around your office telling people exactly what you think of the dress or suit that they're wearing.
Yeah.
If you don't happen to like it, that's just being rude. And, so that kind of self-censorship is totally understandable. What I worry about, like my students at Chapman University, for example, when I ask them if they self-censor, they all raise their hand. And I mean on sensitive issues like, immigration or abortion or, foreign policy, things that really matter. And they're 18, 19 years old. It's the time to start voicing their opinions to see where they really stand and have them tested. So, for example, most of them are pretty liberal. Most of them are pro-choice. And I asked them, what's the best arguments on the pro-life side? And most of them don't really know because they've never really considered it. And and the pro-lifers, I always have a few, usually Catholics, and they're afraid to say anything. I mean, I have to just drag it out of them because they're so afraid that they're going to be canceled, by their fellow students. And that's not good. I worry about that.
Yeah, it's the opposite of intellectual discourse. I mean, you're supposed to challenge each other's opinion as a way of refining your own. I mean, changing a mind is growth.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, John Stuart Mill said it perfectly in his classic work on Liberty in 1859 that he who knows only his own position doesn't even know that.
Right.
The only way to know how solid your arguments are is to know what the counter arguments are. And so, and even if you think the other side's wrong, you got to at least know what they're arguing.
In terms of the history of science, I feel like we are entering some very strange phase right now. I'm watching my own profession shift, and I don't even recognize some of the behavior. Do we have a problem here with science because of all this?
Are you talking about in response to COVID and the pandemic and all that?
Just the politicizing of everything, and the fact that you can't discuss with your peers an opinion about a medication that one country is using versus another country, or your clinical experience with the medication. Yeah. You're not allowed to have a clinical judgment if there's not an evidence basis for it. It's kind of craziness I've never seen before.
Yeah, the scientific issues that are hot button politically or religiously, yes, there you get the polarization that is disconcerting. Most people are not anti-science or science deniers. They're only science deniers on issues that pushes their buttons. So, for example, global warming, climate change got bundled with liberalism when Al Gore's film became so popular in Inconvenient Truth. And so to conservatives, when they hear climate science or global warming, their brain autocorrects to, anti-capitalism, government control of the economy. That's what they hear, so they naturally push back against that. Mm-hmm. And studies show that liberals don't know much more about climate science than conservatives do. So when each side signals their doubt about it or their agreement with it, even though they don't know much about it, what they're doing is they're saying, I trust science, or I don't trust science, or I don't trust government, or
they're really just signaling a tribal position, really, right? It's just tribalism.
Very tribal, yeah. Yeah, and on the other side, the left tends to be pretty anti-nuclear power, as an example, and the right supports that. And vaccines is kind of an equal opportunity offender. Conservatives are concerned about big government intrusion into our private lives, and liberals are concerned about big corporations making a lot of money on vaccines. So you get a little bit of both on that side.
What do we do? And again, there's no correcting it because people aren't discussing. I mean, I'm a big believer in a Hegelian synthesis, right? You've one side or the other, bring it together for a synthetic analysis. There's no opportunity for that, it seems, these days.
Yes, again, on those particular issues. But if you go to your oncologist and he says, you have a prostate cancer or breast cancer, the subject of which chemo or radiation or surgery or what combination you have, that's not politicized. No one's saying, oh, well, the left thinks we should use radiation and the right thinks we should use chemo. That never comes up. People are not anti-science or science deniers with things that are not. They
strangely are with COVID. Strangely.
Yes, the COVID thing has become politicized, right? The China virus, the Wuhan flu, yeah.
Well, I mean, literally I'm noticing even a distinction between how surgeons versus internists are approaching this thing. The surgeons are like, look, when something goes wrong in the surgical field, you improvise, you use your clinical judgment, you start doing things. The internists are all frozen in place, afraid to have an opinion until the orthodoxy comes in to tell them what to do. It's really very strange.
That is interesting. Yeah, well, part of the scientific method is arriving at a consensus amongst the experts in a particular field. And that usually takes some time. And we just haven't had that much.
And medicine has always, in the meantime, relied on improvisation, clinical application, trying things, seeing, sharing with your peers, finding the best approach to help that patient while we work out the science. Not let them die while we work out the science.
Yeah, well, you guys have to actually do something. You can't just say, "Well, let's just wait for the jury to come in with more evidence."
But that's what's happening. That's kind of what's happening because everyone's scared to death. It's very I've never seen this in my career. It's the weirdest thing, and they're so ossified that even when the evidence come in, they kind of push it back. They don't believe it. Like there's the monoclonal antibody infusions for outpatient moderate COVID, clearly working, free to everybody. 600,000 doses are sitting on the shelves, and the doctors refuse to use it because they're afraid.
Wow. Afraid of what?
Afraid of being seen as not pulling the orthodoxy. Until it's widely used, they're afraid to do anything, even though the data is very clear that it's effective. It's very strange, or there's no flow of information, or they're not looking, they're not really studying the literature the way. I don't know what it is. I can't figure it out. For my COVID, I took bamlanivimab and made a huge difference, and I've been advocating strongly for others with moderate COVID to get that because it really. The infusion nurse told me he hears about the improvements all day long. It's covered by Medicaid, it's covered by Medicare, it's covered by everything, and it's sitting there on the shelves. Doctors whenever I recommend it, doctors go, oh, no, it's not. You can't give that as an outpatient. And it is specifically an outpatient medicine. It's crazy.
Yeah, that's interesting. So how did that become politicized or polarized?
Every piece of the way it's become politicized and polarized. The doctors are easily frightened, really easily. We're easily scared. And when you threaten us, we just put our head down and just do what we do and try to do the best we can and don't do anything that's unorthodox or out of the ordinary. Once we get frightened, it's really hard to get them to change their behavior. I mean, you
mean for legal reasons?
Frightened in any way, frightened of scrutiny, frightened. Okay. A lot of them work now for big groups, right? For big corporate groups and for hospitals. The hospitals have control over things, and they don't want to lose their jobs.
Right.
It's really something. Anyway, let's talk about more about cognitive dissonance and about paranoias. And I see the Skeptic has a big QAnon on it this month. I'd love to hear more about that. Yeah, by the way, did you work with Massimo Pulici, the skeptic psychologist?
He's a longtime colleague and friend. Yeah.
Yeah, he's a Stoic philosopher, and he was a evolutionary biologist. I interviewed him once for a podcast I did a couple of years ago. He's a fascinating dude, but I thought he was active in the whole skeptic world.
He is. Yeah, totally. Right. No, he's done a lot of good works in philosophy of science and in what is science and what's the difference between science and pseudoscience. That's an important question. So-called demarcation problem. Where do you draw the line? Astrology is pseudoscience, astronomy is science. There's a lot of clear-cut cases like that, but there's a lot of other cases that are not clear, like string theory or the multiverse in cosmology. We have our next issue is a cover story on the multiverse. And, my guy is a world-class cosmologist. He says, this is not science. There's no way to test it. It's just kind of metaphysics or speculative, So there, it's not just the goofy stuff like psychics or UFOs or whatever. It gets down to the, kind of more serious issues about how science works. So yeah, that's super interesting. QAnon. Yeah. So, this is actually an old idea, an old conspiracy theory that goes back to something like the protocols of the Elders of Zion, that there's these, these learned expert people, a handful of them that are running the world secretly. And, the anti-Semitism of that, a little bit of that spills over into QAnon. For your listeners who don't know what QAnon is. So this is a conspiracy theory that says that there's a cabal of satanic pedophiles that are not only running the world, but they're, sexually molesting children and like with the protocols hoax that, they're draining the blood of children to use for longevity and other things like that. And, this actually started in 2015 when Trump was, the primaries were getting going. And in 2016, just after the election, a guy went to this Comet Ping Pong pizzeria in Washington, D.C.
I remember
the pedophile, he read online, I think it was 4chan, that the pedophile ring was going on in the basement of this pizzeria. So he went there with an AR-15 rifle to break up the pedophile ring. Well, he was quite surprised to discover there's no basement at this pizzeria, right? And of course, he was arrested, and I think he's still in jail. But and he shot like 3 times. I think he took 3 shots. There was no one hurt. So let's think about this for a second. What does it mean to believe something? I mean, I don't think most Republicans tick the box that they think there might be something to QAnon. It's something like tens of millions think that there's something to it. But did they really believe that there's this satanic pedophile ring going on in pizzerias and so forth, and that Hillary Clinton and Tom Hanks and Beyonce and Lady Gaga are all in on it? I don't think so. I think this is one of those kind of like metaphorical or mythical truths. Like, I'm signaling my commitment to my party and my side in a way that this is so ridiculous, I will say I believe it. And that shows how committed I am.
So that's sort of a religious faith.
It is like a religious faith, exactly. So to this guy's credit, he went to the pizzeria with the gun. He took it seriously, in a way. And so this brings us to the, current events, either the BLM protests, and particularly the riots in Seattle and Portland, or the assault on the Capitol on January 6th. If you really believed that the election was stolen, or you really believe that America is a racist cesspool where cops are driving around looking to gun down African Americans, any opportunity they can to kill one, and the police or the authorities or politicians don't seem to be doing anything about it, you feel like you want to act and do something. So the analogy I use is, imagine you're at work, Drew, and you get a call from one of your neighbors, and the neighbor says, somebody's breaking into your house and they're stealing your stuff. There they go with your TV, and so you call the police, and the police say, well, we drove by there, and we don't see anything. There's no evidence of, and your neighbor calls back again and says, dude, they're stealing your stuff. There they go. They have a big truck and they're hauling out your furniture now. Well, if the authorities aren't going to do anything, you're going to want to go home, and maybe you have a gun, maybe you get your friends together and you go in there to stop the steal, right? Mm-hmm. That is kind of a rational thing to do when you really believe this is happening. And the BLM movement, the extreme part of it, the Antifa part, they appear to really believe that, even liberals have been hijacked. They don't even like Biden. They think, he's been bought off. And so they really think like, defunding the police doesn't mean community services should be treating homeless people and mentally ill people and so on, but that instead of the police, what they mean is that there should be no police at all. Okay. No liberal in their right mind thinks that, but this is what they really believe. So I've been giving this some thought, what does it mean to believe something? And again, I like even the steal the election, even most of the before the January 6th event, I think the Republicans, those 116 Republicans who said in Congress, who said, yeah, we think there's something to it. And we're going to, have a further debate about it on January 6th. I don't know. I don't think they really believed it. I think they're siding with the boss because they, their political aspirations or whatever. I think they were afraid to speak out against the boss until January 6th happened, and that changed the formula.
So go back to belief, digging a little deeper on that. What do we mean when we say a belief? Because that's a word that is casually tossed around, and it's tossed around a lot in scientific circles too, where somebody will go, well, I believe in the many worlds theory, or belief has no. I mean, there's some beliefs in science, like you believe the present law of physics will continue to be the law of physics as across the arrow of time. But otherwise, show me the math. I don't care what you believe. Belief has no role.
Yeah.
But we're not talking about. I mean, that I worry about that in the scientific realm, but I worry about it also in the political realm because I'm not sure people really think about what they're talking about.
Yeah, it's a great point. I mean, when I say I believe the Big Bang happened or I believe evolution happened, it's not a belief like I might say, well, I believe in a flat tax and you believe in a progressive tax, or I believe 37% as the top income tax level is the right one, and you say, no, I think it should be 47%, and somebody else says I think it should be 90%. There's no correct answer there, right? This is what politics is about. So truth in politics is different than truth in science. So scientific truths are empirical truths, they're objective truths. At least that's what we aspire to. That, I can check it, you can check it, and we can all kind of converge to some kind of consensus that, yes, that is true right there. And that doesn't exist for politics in the same way. Although, I mean, a case could be made that democracy is objectively better than an autocracy, certainly in terms of, the benefits of more people that are citizens compared, say, South Korea to North Korea. We could objectively say South Korea is a better system than North Korea. But when you get down to the fine tuning, well, what exactly should the upper tax bracket be? I don't think there's a correct answer to that. Like you would say, what's the correct treatment for COVID? You would cite studies for this. I can't cite studies to say what's the best tax rate. That's what politics is about. And then I would distinguish that from, say, religious truths. So for Christians, Jesus died for my sins. That's just a kind of a statement of faith. That's what we believe as Christians. And Jews say, no, we don't believe that. We don't believe Jesus was the Messiah. So of course we don't think he died for our sins. There's no way to adjudicate that. There's no experiment we're going to run to decide whether the Jews or the Christians are correct about who Jesus was and what he did.
And let's kind of drill in a little further. So on one side, you're saying the Jews do not accept a certain axiom as true, therefore don't believe it. But Kierkegaard took that whole idea of belief down a big rabbit hole where he was saying that's the whole point, is the leap of faith to believe things that are far-fetched, and that's what gives you religious, your real connection to your religious experience.
Nice, Kierkegaard. Yeah, it's good. I haven't thought about Kierkegaard in a while. That's right. And but the problem, but as long as that's what we say, we're just taking a leap of faith. This is what I believe. I'm not trying to prove it's really true. But in my line of work, I do a lot of debates with theists who say, I can prove that God exists, or I can prove that Jesus not only existed, but died and was resurrected. And it's like, I don't think you can prove that. Yeah. It's in the way that scientists can. And you don't have to take my word for it because I'm an atheist. Just talk to any Jew who, particularly like rabbis who are super learned, super smart, well-read. They know all the arguments for the resurrection and so on, and they don't accept them. So this tells us that, that it's not an empirical question like in science. It's a different kind of truth or belief. In religion, that's different.
Yeah, it is, and we blur beliefs and opinions that have opinions that have potential. This is my COVID brain. Have potential argumentation attached to it, like proofs. Let's say. I mean, there are things that you believe that you can prove, and the things you believe that you cannot prove. But this gets kind of into the world of cognitive dissonance. And the stream here I'm watching go by, they're very interested in cognitive dissonance and defining that and seeing where it operates today, which is everywhere. But go ahead.
Yeah. So one explanation for why so many people believe the election was stolen, or they believe QAnon is a real conspiracy, or whatever. Cognitive dissonance explains the continued belief in, say, let's just use this example, Trump. And the reason is that if you've committed to something wholeheartedly and you really believe, and you've really poured your soul into it, and so you're here, and this is what you think is really true, that's cognitive harmony. But if it comes to light that, in fact, the claims you thought were true are not true, then that causes cognitive dissonance. Okay, then what happens? To reduce the dissonance, you got to do something. You either abandon your belief and go, I was totally wrong. What a huge mistake that was.
Never happened.
Almost never happened. Yeah. Or you spin doctor the facts. Oh, no, you've misinterpreted. It was this, and it was not that, and so on. So cognitive dissonance was coined by a psychologist named Leon Festinger in 1954. He was a young professor, and he went to join an end of the world cult. This was a UFO cult in Chicago, near Chicago in Illinois. And these were the seekers, and they were thought the mothership was coming on December 21st, which is the winter solstice, the shortest day of the year, in 1954. And most of the members had really made a huge commitment. I mean, they left their families, they sold their belongings, their car, and they quit their jobs and so forth. And they're up there at the top of the hill waiting for the mothership to come at midnight. And so Festinger went with them to see what would happen when prophecy fails. And this is the title of his famous book, When Prophecy Fails, in which he defined cognitive dissonance. He predicted that they would not abandon their beliefs. In fact, that's exactly what happened. They doubled down in the coming days. Well, first of all, there was the evening when it's 12 o'clock and everybody's anxiously looking at their watches and like, oh, maybe it's daylight savings time, or maybe it's Eastern time instead of, Central time, whatever. And, but by the next day, the mothership's not coming. And now usually in end of the world prophecies, the spin doctrine goes like this. Well, this was a miscalculation. I forgot to carry the one, and so it's next year. Or this was a test of our faith, and we passed the test. So, God or whoever, spared us, and so on. So they have a whole list of these excuses. But the last thing most people are going to do is say, you know what? I can't believe I joined this group. What a huge mistake. Can I have my car back? Can I have my job back?
Right. And so some of that is the social context, right? You've signed up for this community where everyone shares the belief and shares it intensely. And you've now run your life around those shared belief, and you have a worldview that's built upon those shared beliefs. Right. And I always think in terms of how would I argue with a flat earther? Like, what would I tell a flat earther? Because I know they're not going to abandon this. And did you see recently they're flat earth scientists, and they got this very fancy gyroscope where they were going to they wanted this forever, and it's terribly expensive. And it's able to, if the world were round, this gyroscope had to be off by 1/4 of a degree or something. And so they ran the experiment, and the gyroscope was off by 1/4 of a degree, and then the gyroscope's broken. We have to explain that. We have to explain why. Right. So anything but accept the experimental results, which is really bad science, by the way. But
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but
like other examples.
Go ahead.
Like ufologists will often say, when I say, well, where's the evidence? Show me the spaceship. Where's the aliens? Well, the government's covering it up. It's at Area 51. So the fact, and this is how we know it's true. So the less evidence you have, the more true it is, which is the exact opposite of science. And I saw something similar to this happen when, we invaded Iraq, and to find those weapons of mass destruction that Saddam Hussein supposedly had. And they didn't find anything. The UN inspectors found nothing. And to his credit, in his memoirs, George Bush said, that was the biggest mistake of my life. I was wrong. right? But that took years to come around. But the spin doctoring by the Republicans at the time, particularly, well, actually Democrats too, that, we know he has weapons of mass destruction because we can't find them, because that means we know he moved them.
Right, they're buried somewhere.
He secreted them away, Again, and that's a commitment. We're going to war and invade a country, and people are going to die, including some of our own soldiers.
Yeah.
And to say, I screwed up, I was wrong, that's almost impossible to do, at least at the time.
Well, but it is a good example, because people have real difficulty doing that, and most people aren't trained to be scientific thinkers, where you're always being told you're wrong, you're always finding out you're wrong. It's just part of updating your priors and Bayesian hypotheses, Bayesian thinking.
Nice, yes.
And I wanted to respond to what you said about Area 51. Now they've got that guy Bob who claims that he was taken in and was given this heavy cesium molecule that produces its own magnetic field, its own gravitational field and all this stuff. And he witnessed a ship that could float and all this business. And I thought. And then people are saying, well, the only possibility is that he was there in Area 51. He saw this stuff. There's another possibility, because the military used to do all kinds of human subject studies back in those days. And if I wanted to know how our enemies were going to deconstruct our technologies, I'd bring in Bob, and I'd put him in a room with Bill, and I'd walk in there every once in a while, give him an unsolvable technological problem, and see how he works it through backwards. And then when we try to protect our own technologies, we'll remember what we learned from Bob, and that'll be that. You know what I mean? And let's let him believe that he saw some alien vessel, but the reaction was this was a human subject experiment to understand how people deconstruct technologies. That's a viable explanation for what happened to Bob, right?
Well, I would accept that over his explanation, but I think there's an even simpler explanation, and that is he just made it up. I mean, people just make stuff up.
I'm willing to accept it. I'm willing to just, as an assumption, say, okay, Bob actually experienced these things. But if you have the most important physics discovery in history, you're going to hand it over to Bob and his buddy? That's who you're going to give it to deconstruct it? That you give it to those two screwballs? And then you're going to have a general walk in the room 3 times a week to go, how's it going? No, you're not going to. That's going to be at Princeton or Caltech. Period. That's where that's going.
Yes, that's right.
Or the linear accelerator.
Well, what made me particularly skeptical of Bob Lazar was that he appears to have lied about his credentials. He said he went to MIT and to Caltech.
Yeah.
And one of his own colleagues, Stan Friedman, who was a hardcore ufologist, he died last year. And I've been on Larry King with him a couple times doing debates, and he totally believed in UFOs. They've been here. And so on. And he looked into Bob Lazar's credentials. And when Bob Lazar said, I have graduate degrees from MIT and Caltech, turns out he didn't even have a bachelor's. He went to like a community college or something like that.
He did take some classes at MIT or something. He was like a year or two at MIT.
Yeah. Well, if you're going to lie about something that's as checkable as your credentials, because anybody could call MIT or Caltech and say, I'm checking to see, did this guy go here? Did he graduate from here? So the answer to that, Lazar's answer and Lazar's supporters' answer is, well, they erased his record. They. Well, who's the they? Well, they did.
Right.
Well, okay. Universities are very protective of their students' records. They don't just let anybody come in and erase those records. I mean, it's just very unlikely to happen. So again, I love that you brought up Bayesian reasoning, adjusting your priors. So maybe you give Lazar a little bit of credit and you keep an open mind. All right, let's listen to the story. When you hear about the lied about his credentials, boom, your priors go way down. Well, if he's willing to make up something about that's so easily checkable, what else is he willing to make up?
Right. And so I want to go back to arguing with conspiratorial thinkers. My understanding is because of something called the backfire effect, which we could argue about whether that's strong or weak or even happens, but that you can get people on board with, you can reason them into narrow positions, but not to abandon the landscape, right? Like you can convince them a measles vaccine is a good idea, but you can't make them not anti-vaxxer if they're inclined that way. And it seems to me that the basis of all this is a worldview. And so you have to, and I always thought, I wonder if I were arguing with them, if I sort of appealed to what would have to adjust in my worldview I mean, for the world to be flat, trigonometry would stop working.
Yes,
Basic
right.
cosmology would completely collapse and have no meaning whatsoever. So, it's hard for me. I would just say it's hard for me to accept that. Trigonometry seems like a pretty good system to me, and so does calculus. And these foundational structures are how we know the world is not flat. And to see if you can get somebody around that, I don't know. It feels to me also like the one of the flip. I don't know if it's exactly the flip side, but one of the congeners of cognitive dissonance is Dunning-Kruger.
Yes,
The Dunning-Kruger effect. Cognitive dissonance is alive. I feel like between cognitive dissonance and Dunning-Kruger, we've sort of captured the world zeitgeist right now, at least the U.S. zeitgeist.
There's a lot of that going on, definitely. Well, so the backfire effect is interesting. I wrote about that in Scientific American when those studies first came out, saying, oh my God, this is worse than I thought. Now I can't even try to debunk crazy claims because the people will double down on it.
Right.
But those studies weren't replicated,
Right.
of course, about the replication crisis we're
Right.
going
So
through in your field.
Let me just say,
medicine, in
in
my field,
psychology
social-
especially, nothing can be replicated. So we're wondering,
I know,
in
it's
medicine too,
very-
a lot of things don't get replicated.
I know. This is disturbing. Well,
Yeah.
but so how do we know if a conspiracy theory is likely to be true? That is to say, there really was a conspiracy. Well, so I set up a set of criteria. I call it the conspiracy detection kit. And it goes like this. How many people would have to be involved in it? The more people that have to be involved, the less likely it is to be true. We know that about human nature, people can't keep their mouth shut. People want to go on shows like yours and tell what they saw in Area 51 or what they saw, on 9/11 or whatever. And so, again, 9/11, how many people would have to be involved in the intentional detonation of two of the two largest buildings in North America?
Yeah.
I mean, that, are super secure because of the attacks on the buildings in 1993.
Yep.
And, so they have to concoct these. Well, they were pretending to operate on work on the elevators, it's like, and it just goes on and on. And how many elements would have to come together at the exact same perfect time, in a perfect coordination? You'd have to fly the planes, because we all saw the planes hit the buildings, although there are no planers in the 9/11 community. People say there were no planes. It was all holograms.
Wow.
Anyway, I mean, and the regular 9/11 truthers, they debunk the no planer 9/11 truthers, which is kind of interesting when they start debunking each other. But again, so you'd have to fly the planes into the building, and the planes would have to hit the buildings at the exact floor that you set the devices to explode, to detonate the building for it to collapse. At that angle. I mean, again, this is not possible. This is impossible, right? And again, and also, the more grand the conspiracy theory is, why did Bush do this? Oh, to get oil and control the Middle East and run the world, and it just goes on and on. Real conspiracies are very accident prone, very chancy. Things rarely go according to plans. We find out about them because people can't keep their mouth shut.
Yeah,
They
try
tell
keeping a
somebody,
secret
tell
with
somebody.
try keeping a secret with one other person. Forget a cabal.
Right.
Just one other person.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, there's not one person in the Bush administration that wants to go, again, on your show or 60 Minutes and go, I was married to the guy that planted the explosive device, or I was dating the guy that did, something. We know that people can't wait to talk about what they saw. And, so, and also I would add one thing: negative evidence. That is to say, something that should be there but isn't. So, like in the WikiLeaks, millions of classified documents from the government. There's not one document in there about 9/11 is an inside job. Not one document about the aliens are hidden at Area 51.
Right.
Nothing.
Right.
So the lack of something there tells us that's evidence for a lack of a conspiracy.
Except the conspiratorial thinking will say, well, of course they want to hide it from you, but whatever. You can keep going. You can go ad nauseum.
Well,
you can go.
yes,
You can keep making.
Right.
Again. How about Dunning-Kruger? I sort of see that as a major problem right now, where people imagine they have expertise they don't have. That is just run amok now with the internet.
Yes, of course. Right. I mean, I think probably a lot of us think that, we just want to keep rising, and at some point you hit your ceiling, and usually there's someone along the way to keep that in check. online, when you're your own publisher and you have your own conspiracy or whatever, there's nobody to keep you in check.
Right.
And this is why it's dangerous to operate alone. These kind of lone wannabe scientists that think they figured out how the universe works, and Einstein was wrong and Newton was wrong and Stephen Hawking was wrong. And I figured it all out in my garage over the weekend. And I'll share the Nobel Prize with you if you help me with the math. I get letters from these people.
Wow.
And it's like, have you checked with the local high school physics teacher to see if your equations are right? Because, I'm a social scientist. I'm not a physicist. In other words, working in isolation means you can easily go off the rails down some pathway that leads to nowhere. And it's good to have somebody to say, hang on for a second. I think that, in step 3 here, you've lost the thread.
And I've seen a graph that suggests that knowledge and expertise follows a rather predictable pattern where initially, as you learn about something, you think you know a lot. That's when Dunning-Kruger kicks in. And then when you really start to learn about it, then you start to feel like you know nothing. And then you move up into actual expertise and wisdom, and that's when the imposter effect kicks in. That's when you feel like you're an imposter and you don't really know anything.
Right.
And that's something.
Well, and it's also disturbing when it happens in science. That is when scientists go out of their field and comment on something else, like, Linus Pauling and vitamin C, or, other scientists that comment on politics. Einstein, we got to have a world government. Oh, really? A world government? And what do you know about, history of political science and so on? Nothing, but he's Einstein, right? So he can pronounce on anything. Or physicists that comment on economics. I think this is the right, Keynesian economics is the right one. What do you know about economics? Nothing. But I won the Nobel Prize, so I'm, I'm free to comment on anything I want. No, you're not. That's not good either.
What kinds of stuff worries you now? Are there things that are going on that that you either I'm sort of gravely concern you, or B, you see a solution to that we have to find our way to, or maybe those aren't mutually exclusive sorts of ideas?
Well, the divisiveness of the country, of course, that's been well documented, and not just since Trump, but it's been going on really since the late 90s. Driven in part, I think, by talk radio and then the internet and so forth. We can see the graphs, the two lump curves, left and right, spread further and further apart. In other words, there's fewer people that are self-identified as independents, and more that are self-identified as strong or very strong conservative, or strong or very strong liberal. And those have been pulling apart. That then gets translated into what I do. Just science becomes politicized. If you believe global warming, or you don't believe in vaccines, or then you're on this team or that team. That makes it really hard to even talk about it, because then you're on that side, you're on the wrong side, or whatever. That worries me. The replication crisis, again, how did this happen? I thought the peer review system was not perfect, but it was supposed to work pretty good, so there's some cognitive biases in there about, confirmation bias and, selection of certain experiments that you highlight, but the other ones you ran that got no results, this is the file drawer problem. No one ever hears about them. You just put them in the file drawer, and you only publish the ones that, we need to know what the failed experiments were.
The negatives,
and the negatives, and so that worries me. The public trust in science has gone down because of, I think, in part, the replication crisis, and then the politicization of climate change and vaccines and nuclear power and other things like that. GMOs also another one that liberals tend to be skeptical of, when there's no evidence that GMOs harm bodies or even are bad for the environment.
Well, what's interesting to me about that is I was a ecologist in the 70s. You remember the word ecology and ecologist? And we had acid rain. Do you remember that? And we were predicting a massive famine, where the world was the end of oil and massive famine. Those were our two sort of notes, that there's no way we're going to feed the world. And we invented GMOs and took care of business. That was it. It took care of there were no famines because of GMOs.
Right. Yes. Well, Paul Ehrlich's dire predictions of, billions of people dying of starvation.
Yes, that was it.
And, the end of the rainforest. I think you and I are about the same age. So, I took ecology class. There'll be no more rainforest by like 1984.
None.
Okay. What happened with that?
And acid rain was going to destroy agriculture in the U.S., and there was going to be massive famine worldwide because of overpopulation, and we couldn't keep up with the agricultural demands. Just couldn't do it. Impossible. Here's the math. I'll show you the math. But we didn't anticipate GMOs. We just didn't see it coming.
Right.
And that took care of it.
Again, and this is why it's important to have economics, an economist on your team when you're talking about the environment, for example. We will never run out of oil. Never. And when I tell people this, they're just like, what do you mean we can't? It's a finite resource. Of course we can run out of it. No, because the last barrel will cost, $100 million.
Right.
So no one's going to spend the money to get it out of the ground, right?
Right.
As they like to say, we didn't leave the Stone Age because we ran out of stones, right? We find other ways to use the resources we have. And when they get start to deplete, the price goes up, and then companies have to find some other way to find energy in this particular case. So, right. These projections about climate change, the super dire ones. I think global warming is real and human cause, but once you project out, well, then we have to do this because if we don't, the error bars grow fairly wide a century out, and it's not clear to me that this is an existential threat comparable to nuclear weapons, for example. Mm-hmm. I think it's a problem we should address for sure. But you asked me what I'm concerned about. The apocalypse, this kind of existential crisis of everything. Yeah. I think leads people to think, well, why should we bother? I mean, there's nothing I can do. I'm just a regular guy. What am I going to do? And, so it's hopeless. Why bother to even spend energy or time on the problem when it's so bad? And that's the problem with, that kind of doomsdayism.
And, I brought this up when I interviewed you on television, and you sort of dismissed me on it, but it feels like there's something in the personality construct of the day, and histrionic is part of it. It's like we become hysterical for some reason, and it feels gratifying to us for some reason. And whether it's just the natural ebb and flow of generational personality styles or whatever, there's something going on now where we are just so involved in hysterics. And I talked to one psychiatrist who thought it was actually reaching the level of delusion, where we sort of had a mass delusion going on in the country.
Part of it is the negativity bias. That is, negative things stand out more than positive things. Yeah. As behavioral economists like to say, losses hurt twice as much as gains feel good. Mm-hmm. So if you want to get somebody to make an investment or buy a stock or whatever, they got to feel like the payoff is going to be about twice what the loss will feel like. And so most people are very risk averse, loss aversion, risk aversion, because of this. So we notice, for example, far more the handful of negative things that you'll see, like scrolling down your screen right now or in your Twitter feed or whatever. Maybe after this show you'll get 250 positive, way to go, it was a great interview, and 3 that was the worst interview, and you'll notice the 3 bad ones, and you'll just kind of dismiss the 250. Yep. So we notice negative things. We have more.
No, but you do, and the theory is, one of the theories is that when we were trying to survive on the environment of evolutionary adaptiveness on the plains of the savannah, it was much more important that we noticed the leopard than the nice donkey we were petting. Yes. How our brain was constructed. Yeah.
I like a quote from Jimmy Connors. He said, "I hate losing more than I like winning." Yeah. And Lance Armstrong used to say that, like I just want to win because I can't stand this idea of losing. It's just so hateful to me. It's like, wow, okay, that's a negativity bias, right? Yep. So, and linguists have tracked that we have more negative words than positive words. For emotions, for example, there's more words describing negative emotions than positive emotions. And the truth is, since you hinted at it with the evolutionary thing, it's entropy. It's the second law of thermodynamics. There's way more ways for things to go wrong than right. Just think of it like a sand castle. How many configurations of sand and water can you get to stay in one place that looks like a castle? Just a few. How many ways are there for a pile of sand to just be this amorphous blob? Infinite, right? Infinite, yeah. And how many ways are there for you to, become the CEO of a Fortune 500 company? Not many people will ever get there. How many ways are there for you to not get that job? an infinite number of ways to not get that job, right? There's just so many ways. So it's like in economics, it's like there's all these books explaining poverty. Poverty doesn't need an explanation. That's what you get naturally when you do nothing. That's what the universe is just running down. You have to carve out a niche of order against entropy and produce wealth, right? So wealth needs an explanation, not poverty, because there's just so many ways for things to not go your way.
Let's sort of wrap up with a quick description of skepticism and maybe how how you should think skeptically when you're analyzing or looking at some phenomena.
Yeah. So, what we mean by skeptic is really just a kind of a scientific way of thinking, that is asking for evidence, trying to falsify your beliefs, asking people who make a claim, what's the evidence for that? How did you hear about that? And most especially, what would it take to change your mind? Or technically we would say, falsify your claim. But, just say, how would you change your mind? What would it take? And maybe you offer your own, right? Because in conversing with people like, say, conspiracy theorists, if you tell them that they're just idiots for believing this, the wall goes up, they're not listening, right? So you got to, kind of open the conversation by first, Rappaport's rules. That is to say, repeat the other person's position so well that they go, yes, that's exactly what I believe. Then, first of all, there's usually adjustments there, because they usually go, no, that's not what I'm arguing.
Right.
Here's what I'm arguing.
Right.
You go, okay.
It doesn't sound right when it comes back at them.
Exactly. Right. A lot of it is that, I think.
Yeah.
But it also shows respect. They think, this guy's listening to me. Okay. Yeah. All right. I'm going to listen to him in that case. So that kind of opens up the conversation and keeps it going. And also then you have to kind of unbundle or divorce the particular scientific claim, let's say in this case, from their worldview, their deep political or religious worldview. Again, I like to say, if you give people a choice between Darwin and Jesus, and they're a Christian, they're not picking Darwin, right? Because they're Christians. This is how they define themselves. You got to just take Jesus out of it. Look, maybe evolution is the way God created diversity of life. That's how he did it. Okay, you can accept both. And I usually direct them then to Francis Collins, who's an evangelical born-again Christian and one of the finest, most articulate expositors of evolutionary theory, right? So he's on your team and he says it's okay to believe this, right? And anyway, so, that makes it less of a team thing. Like, well, I can't go down that road, Shermer, because I'm a Christian or I'm a conservative or whatever. And again, like with conservatives, if it's a liberal thing like climate change, you don't have to give up your beliefs in capitalism and free markets. You can have green technology and make a ton of money. I call it the Elon Musk model, right? You can become the richest person on the planet by saving the planet from greenhouse gases by selling electric cars, something like that.
Or by pulling CO2, pulling CO2 out of the environment and making they were making bricks out of it or something.
Yes, there are buildings now that absorb CO2 gas. It's incredible what we're able to do.
Well, listen, I appreciate you stopping by and following up with me. It's all stuff I could talk about forever. We're history of science, psychology of thought. Experimental psychology, all is just so fascinating to me. And in the current environment, did you interview on a podcast called "You Were Not So Smart"? Does that sound right?
I think
You'd be good for that
podcast
podcast if you hadn't yet. I'm going to talk to him about you being on there.
I don't know. I'm going to read you one thing from that was very revealing about the Q conspiracy. This is on one of the QAnon web pages. Have you ever wondered why we go to war, or why you never seem to be able to get out of debt? Why there's poverty, division, crime? What if I told you there's a reason for it all?
What if I told you everything on purpose? Unifying theory of the universe.
As each of those things I just rattle off, war, crime, poverty, and so on, each of them has just this kind of rat's nest of confounding variables, and social scientists devote their whole lives
and have been present throughout human history. Were the same pedophiles around during the War of the Roses? Is that what we're saying here?
Exactly. No, you don't have to bother with all that science. It's these guys that are doing all this on purpose, the Illuminati or the Learned Elders of Zion or QAnon, the deep state, not QAnon, the deep state. And Trump's going to defeat the deep state. It's, in other words, it's much simpler. It's gratifying. It feels good to, that I have an inside track on what's really going on. Psychologically, people like that.
I am so tired of all this. I really am. I'm just exhausted by the last couple of years. It's been.
It'd be nice to not talk about that.
Oh my God, yes. The tribalism, the histrionics, the hysterical hair catching on fire regularly every day about something where I can't remember what it was from the day before, and then Dunning-Kruger and the cognitive dissonance that people are avoiding. It just goes on and on and on. And now it's, as you've opened this conversation, gotten worse because there's no corrective agent, meaning free speech of what I just think of as a Hegelian sort of dialectic. We just sort of, we normally come together and share these things and reach some sort of consensus, or at least more accurate view or construct in terms of our understanding of things. But I don't know. I hope we get back on track here.
Yeah. Also, the economic model of the media is now, I think, broken. That is to say, it's so fragmented that even the big networks like ABC, CBS, and NBC that used to be pretty trustworthy, now they just hype up every story, breaking news as we come on the air, every night.
Yes.
It's like, how could it be like this every night?
Right. And that's right.
Because they're competing with, a zillion other people that are drawing advertising dollars from them.
That's right. I hope the market corrects all these things, but we'll have to see. Michael, is your last name spelled SCHER or SHER?
No, just SHER.
Yeah, I'm seeing it. So what's on the screen here is wrong. It's Michael Shermer.
For
It's
Christ's
at Michael
sakes.
Shermer, SHERMER.
Oh, you should have told me sooner.
I texted
I think it was
you a half
Q.
hour
I think
ago.
it was.
I don't look
I
at
think.
my text.
What's
I
that?
think QAnon went in there and changed it. That's what I think happened.
The pedophiles have been.
No, it was a ghost.
Yes.
Come on.
Oh my God.
I only have. Oops.
Yes, or the aliens.
Sorry about that.
But I do think
That's all right, no
I've
worries.
noticed that at least the Gen Zers are sort of catching on to news being, opinion and entertainment, not news. And they're sorting
Except
through it
Yes,
on their own.
yes.
I put it a small A.
And trying to understand, where is the actual story? What's the news? What is the information, so we can sort of call it together for ourselves, which is, I think, a healthier way to look at it. But who knows? All these biases we're talking about may make things splinter apart further. I don't know.
Well, I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've reminded people the evening Fox hosts, Hannity and Carlson and Ingram, they're not Fox News like the daytime people.
Right.
They're not journalists like the daytime staff are. And it's a different thing. It's more like, the entertainment portion of the evening.
And
like
MSNBC and CNN have the same stuff going on.
Same
They have
thing.
Some
Yeah,
news and some not.
absolutely.
Some
Yeah.
you can't tell when
Yeah,
they're pulled out of the
that's
news into
right.
the entertainment. And
That's right. Yeah.
I'm somewhat guilty, and I felt bad. I was thinking about this today at HLN. We did entertain. We were not doing the news. We never thought of ourselves as doing the news. And I made some programming around, trying to. We were not doing the news. They should have a channel like that where they don't do the news. They just do sort of. We thought we were doing sort of water cooler topics. Stuff people were conversing about, interested in, gossiping about, that kind of thing. But it was not. We didn't think of ourselves as the news. And then all of a sudden, the entire cable news world became that. Very strange. All right, Michael, where can we find you elsewise? Well, Twitter, Michael Shermer. The book is Giving the Devil His Due, which I want to read.
Yep.
And
Skeptic.com. Skeptic.com is our webpage. That's the best portal to get to my work.
All right, skeptic.com. And I'm going to stick around and answer some of your questions on the thread here. Michael, thank you so much. I hope I'll see you again soon.
All right. Thanks, Dr. Drew.
All right,
we'll talk to you again later.
That would be
Bye-bye.
great.
Good night.
Let me get to your guys' question here on the thread. If you have anything you want to ask me, I'll get to it right now, and then we'll wrap up the evening. Because I'm easily fatigued here, guys.
You seem better today.
I am a little better.
God, I got his name wrong. You guys didn't notice it.
I did, and I texted you quite some time ago, and you told me you got it on the text you returned.
You said that people are complaining about the sound.
Let's look at my Shermer's name wrong on the screen.
I didn't see that.
That was at 5:31. So
all you have to do is tell me.
Parents won't even see me, though I have COVID. I've had COVID. They still think I can give it to them. Lauren, go get a COVID test and then get a COVID antibody test. You can show them that you're not producing COVID virus. You are producing antibody, and there's no possibility of you transmitting it. And you can wear a mask also when you go over there.
Yeah.
Safe to go to the dentist. I've been going to the dentist right along. They are quite masked up, and they're using all kinds of great techniques.
I'm going
Some
tomorrow.
of they use stuff like this in the throat to clear out whatever virus might be there. Let's see what you guys... I'm eating meat and drinking plenty. Thank you, Anarchy. The table that I showed about a month ago about the death percentage by age. Oof, I don't know if we can pull that out. Yeah. I can tell you now, having had COVID and having family members that had COVID, if you're young, it's a mild illness. And if you're older, it beats the crap out of you. And if you have, hypertension and metabolic syndrome, that stuff, it gets even worse. It's a good time. Did I have taste issues? I did not, B-World. I did not have smell. No, my smell remained normal. I did have some weird taste issues where I could only taste salty and hot temperature, not hot spicy, hot temperature. So everything tasted salty, and coffee was my best friend. Oreo, Don? I'm not quite sure what you're talking about there. Why is Dr. Carl Hart upset with you? I don't know who that is, even.
Oh, he was on Stern today.
Carl Hart?
I saw somebody who said that. What did you think about Carl Hart on Stern today?
I don't know.
But
who that is.
It seemed like I listened on the way home, and it seemed like an old one. So
don't know. How long do antibodies remain in your system? We don't know. We're thinking at least 6 months. I'm going to get my Aditech score every month, and we're going to monitor it, and let's see where it goes. When Kevin from Kevin and Bean got reinfected, that's when I got a little religion about monitoring this to make sure. Dr. Fauci says you should take the vaccine 3 months after your COVID illness. I understand why he said that. That's a reasonable thing. I'd like to go more like 6 to 8 months if possible.
Here's the chart with the ages on it.
Oh, yeah, there you go. So
but
there it
this
is.
Until December.
Yeah.
I don't know where Joe Giannotti got it. Joe, are you out there? You can tell us.
Joe's not. I'm not sure Joe's still on the thread anymore.
Turmeric
is an anti-inflammatory. Yeah, turmeric is an anti-inflammatory. It has some good properties. I mean, it's not preventing COVID, but it's probably okay if you have COVID. What happened to 3-year trials for vaccine? They did concurrently the things that they normally do sequentially across 3 years. They did them all concurrently, so they got them done in 6 to 8 months. And it's the same exact testing, same testing. The only thing that's of any concern about this is that is a new technology, and it's never been used on a mass scale like this before. Whether we would see something down the line for people on such a high level, such a high frequency of use. If you're older with pre-existing conditions, it's worth that risk because you're going to get beat up by this thing no matter what. Oh, good. CBD, Bill. Excellent. CBD it can be a good thing for some people. I have some patients really swearing by it, in fact. Okay, everybody. Susan, was there something else?
Like who's coming up?
No. I noticed you said on here that I was going to answer questions. And was there some questions?
No, people were asking, are you going to answer a question? I said you would. So
okay, well,
if they're not here anymore, it's,
Sam, 27, no health issues. My son is 27, had COVID, and said he's not going to take the vaccine because he doesn't care if he gets COVID again. It was so mild.
And we're going to be taking calls tomorrow with Jillian Barbary, if anybody knows.
Oh, is Jillian coming in? Oh, my gosh.
Yeah, well, she's not coming in. So 3 p.m. tomorrow on Ask Dr.
Excellent.
Drew. And then also we have a special treat of Emily Morse.
Oh my gosh,
Thursday.
Emily, great.
Okay, yeah.
Which we're moving away from COVID a little bit.
We're going to talk about sex and COVID.
Okay.
And then on Friday, your buddies from the ex-Republican White House.
You got them. Yeah,
Art Kleinschmidt and
so
Katie
Katie is a judge who had a drug court and had exceptional results getting people into recovery. Art is a recovering hardcore drug addict, homeless person who's working on the homeless problem.
Right, but they're now gone.
They were with the Department of Justice, and now they're out. So, but they are still important members of our community.
They have some inside information they're going to give us on Friday.
Oh, that's after the so they can talk after the inauguration.
Oh yeah, she keeps emailing me, and I'm just
I
don't know if I should say anything, but
All right, all you guys that want to hear the,
she's a lovely human being,
Yes.
amazing
Yes, she is.
woman.
Yes, she is.
And if she's being treated poorly, I'm going to be pissed.
She's always hinted at there being sort of more deep state, sort of, not that it's a conspiracy, but there's a lot of ossified stuff going on in the deep state. I think
she's more concerned with what's in the news and what's really happening. That's what my instincts. I didn't ask her a lot of questions because I'm not going to email her anything because she works in the White House.
And Crystal, yes,
the FBI after
high blood pressure does increase your risk.
Bless you. Oh, it's
that time.
Yeah.
Owen's pug, be very careful coming up that effect. So you've been on a long time. You have to taper down very slowly. There can be a real unpleasant withdrawal syndrome from that sometimes, not always. High blood pressure is a risk factor. Yes. Doesn't put you at line earlier for the vaccine. It does not. Is caffeine addictive? Not technically, though there is a dependency to it. There's no consequence from caffeine use. You have to have consequence from a drug of addiction. All right, let's wrap this thing up. Good night, Lenore Johnson.
Watch Fox LA. Alex Michelson is in D.C., and he's right on the front lines there behind the National Guard curtain.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, he's out there freezing his butt out.
Oh, my goodness.
But, yeah. So that'll be really interesting to see how that went. But Drew will be back maybe Friday, right?
Maybe Friday, definitely Monday. And
in the studio, right?
It's no concern to any age. I know many 20s, 30s, 40s have had bad cases who are long haulers. Everybody knows somebody at every age who has died of this thing, okay? But the statistics of have trouble, Berman, are people who are older. That's who has the real trouble. Yes, there are people with obesity, people with hypertension, people with other things in their 20s, 30s, and 40s. They have to be careful. You might be unlucky, but the data is with you. It's the same reason I was never scared of this thing when I got it, because I had a less than a 1% chance of dying of it. That's just statistically the case. I have a 10% chance of dying of my prostate cancer, and I consider it cured. So less than 1% risk did not even enter my thinking as something that was.
I think if you had waited a week, you might have been hospitalized.
If I'd waited a week
to do any of the protocol.
Oh, absolutely, I would have. I'm West Virginian. We are up at YMH now at with After Dark. We did one today.
Okay, it'll probably air on Thursday.
Is that when they put them up?
All right. Thursday is the podcast, and Friday will be the YouTube channel.
And again, back to what he was saying about the long hauler symptoms, Berman, I'm saying that we should be paying more attention to the morbidity of this thing and less attention to the mortality because it's so rare. And yeah, I'm a long hauler technically right now. I'm 1 month out and I'm still having symptoms. So I am a long hauler, and it is no fun. I assure you, it is no fun. I'm convinced that fluvoxamine, Luvox, is a very good treatment for that. You might tell your friends who have long hauler symptoms about that. And you can also register with Dr. Yogendra. He's studying these at length, trying to figure out what's going on with the various manifestations of long hauler syndrome. There's probably different things going on, to be fair. But yeah, it is an inflammatory disease. It is nasty, and the morbidity of it is worse than the mortality. And we're so focused on the mortality that we don't focus on the misery and the morbidity and the long hauler stuff that is out there.
Dr. Yo said he had 300 emails thanks to us. And just in case anybody needs his email or his website, it's covidlonghaulers.com.
Doobie-doobie-doo. I did not take fluvoxamine. I discussed it with my doctor. That's what it looks like. Doobie-doobie-doo. That's what it says. Yabba-dabba-doo. I didn't take fluvoxamine. I'm prepared to. If I'm not really resolved by the end of the week, I will really think about it. I'll discuss it again with my doctor, but I'm better now.
Tom Zagar's mad because we only have 73 likes today.
Oh, gross.
Come on, there's 600 people. Well, maybe
that's gross, Tom's.
Thank you for promoting us, Tom.
All right. So questions I wanted answered.
You have so much more stamina today. I'm so happy.
Okay. Jamie. When Drew asked about the questions that wanted answered, Susan said, well, they are still here. They can ask again, and then they ignore the questions. What questions are you talking about?
Which one? Who is
If
that?
I saw your question, obviously I would answer it. I'm trying to answer every question here. Yes.
Did you get the antibody test?
I did get the antibody test, as I've discussed repeatedly. I've done the additive score. And I have the average vaccine response to spike protein is measured on a quantitative scale of about 10 to 15,000. I was 170,000. Also, I had multiple antibodies to multiple viral capsids and other viral proteins. So should the spike protein mutate, the vaccine could be in trouble. I will not be in trouble because I have antibodies against multiple viral proteins. Is that your question? Answered again.
So I was wondering why I didn't get it, and I think I had it last
No,
year.
no.
I swear to
You
God.
did not have it.
But
Stop
you
saying
can
that.
get it a year later.
Look,
so
we just had a skeptic on here. Let me be super clear. Show me the evidence.
I know.
Okay,
but
there's
I
no
just
evidence.
think that was a shitty serum test.
No, there's no such thing. So you did stop saying that.
So
That's
do you
just,
think it's just all the hormones that I'm taking, or what do you think? I mean, in your
that what?
doctor brain.
That what?
Like why I didn't get it? Like I was
Because
with you.
some
I was
people don't have
with
the
you
they
the
don't
night
have the
before.
right receptor site for it on the nasal pharynx. The ACE2 receptors doesn't.
I wax my nose hairs.
Your thinking is way off on this by about 1,000 miles. It is a not even microscopic cell
It's
surface
so weird.
protein that and you may have an excellent immune response to it for whatever reason. Because we've said you have excellent
I
immunity.
have O negative
Yeah.
blood too.
Yeah. So it's a combination of biological factors.
I'm a
Not
Catholic.
everybody gets every illness. And I still think you would get it, but it maybe requires a different level of exposure. or
How I
something.
lived through my 20s, I have no idea. So trust me, I have a really amazing immune system.
Yes, beyond. And that's just the truth. And that's what you need. And you should feel really good about that.
I feel great. I mean, I have joint pain just like every other 60-year-old, but I'm fine.
Yes, you're beyond.
I know.
Beyond.
It's weird.
Yeah, beyond.
And Joshua, don't worry, I'm fine. I'm not disappointed that I didn't get it, but I'm just amazed.
Kim, we've tested her. She is not asymptomatic, and she has not
Now
been
I've
exposed.
had so
Neither.
many COVID tests in the last 3 weeks. If you only knew.
Yeah, and I don't when and we're
I
going to
get
get her the
disappointed
vaccine
all
when
the
it becomes when it's all available, and she's going to be fine, and that's going to be that. And she
Yeah.
won't have any reaction to the vaccine either.
Nah.
I promise you on that.
Yeah, vaccines are better. I have to get my shingle shot too. When can I get that? Should I get that like?
The
soon?
shingle shot? Yeah, you should get that soon. Yeah, that's worth getting right away. Okay, I am crashing a bit.
Okay.
She did get the antibody test at all repeatedly, and they were negative.
Yeah.
And I'm going to get her an additive score also, so I can show her. And she may have, some antibodies that don't show up on the spike protein antibody screen that might be giving her some immunity as well. So we'll check for all that.
So weird.
Okay, thank you so much, everybody.
Don't forget to get the book.
Yeah.
Giving the Devil His Due.
Yeah, that looks good. And
Nice guy.
yes.
Good eye, Drew.
Yes, no, I know. I could tell. I mean, I talked to him for like 3 minutes on Fox, and I thought I wanted to go a deeper dive. Don't forget the UVC light, the eye wand. Put that up there, Susan.
Okay.
And our friends at Halodyne, and all our usual suspects here that are good enough to keep us operating. Yeah, eye wand that's a great instrument. I carry it with me wherever I go. And again, it's not just COVID. COVID is largely airborne, everybody, so it's not going to do a lot for that.
They
But
have
there's a
new
lot of
wipes.
illnesses that
They're
are
selling wipes now,
fomite
too.
fomite transmitted.
I saw on Twitter they're selling wipes.
Who
as
is?
well. The I1 people,
Optech.
Optex
Huh.
people. Sorry, I took a little weekend off. I'm not on my game. But also, if you want to get a room rover, which is basically
The big
a
one.
big one,
Yeah.
you can also get it there. The
That's what we
Dr. Drew 15 code doesn't
We
work, but-
purchased one of those for Anthony Brown's hospital because we like
And they
him and what he's
love it.
doing, but I like the instrument too. I like the
They
stuff.
love it. They
Yeah.
love it.
Okay. Anything else we need to review, guys? Everybody
Nope.
good? Jillian Barbary and Emily Morrison here tomorrow. Check out Yo Dr. Yo. Also, Additic Score. I believe you can sign up there now. They're telling me that they've updated the website. You can go to. Want to put that screen up, Susan? Also.
Which one? The Addict?
Additic Score.
You got it, babe Kate.
Okay, GSR, you missed my conversation earlier about the new variant. The new variant is more contagious. It will take over. That's just the way it goes. But it does not appear to be, and the seed, symbiotic. I love that stuff. And it does not appear to be, it's more contagious, but it is not more virulent, and it's not getting around the immunity of the previous infection or the vaccine. So there are some ones out there that are a little bit of concern, but it's not this, not yet. Hopefully we can get everybody vaccinated and get this thing suppressed before it really starts to mutate, get going again.
We love our sponsors.
All right, guys, thank you so much for being here. And we will see you with Jillian Barbary tomorrow at 3 o'clock, Susan. Is that correct?
Yes.
3 o'clock tomorrow. We'll see you there.
That'll be a treat.
That'll be fun. We'll see you there. Well, I too have struggled with GI issues over the years. I have something called Lynch syndrome, so gut health is extremely important to me. And while gut health awareness has increased, it's led to a wellness trend that's inspired a host of questionable marketing and some false claims. Now, you've seen the word probiotic attached to all kinds of supplements, drinks, even more. They may claim to deliver the healthy microorganisms our gut needs for proper function, but all too often the promises are in fact too good to be true. Thankfully, I became aware of a company called Seed and their flagship product, the Daily Synbiotic. Seed's Daily Synbiotic offers 24 clinically researched strains of microorganisms in a single dose. These strains support gut health and can improve regularity and relieve bloating, sometimes within as little as 24 to 48 hours. To me, what really sets Seed's Daily Synbiotic apart is the delivery system. While some products may offer the right strains, they're fragile, they rarely survive the trip through the gut, doesn't get where it needs to go, but Seed uses a capsule-in-capsule design that helps ensure the probiotic reaches your colon, which is where they often are needed. I've been taking Seed's Daily Synbiotic, and I really encourage you to check out their story and the science behind what they do. To try it for yourself, just go to seed.com/Dr. Drew. Use code Dr. Drew 20 for 15% off your first month of Daily Synbiotic. That is SEED.com/Dr. Drew. Use code Dr. Drew 20.
Real talk.
Headlines have become it's sickening. They become poisonous.
Dissecting headlines.
Defying state orders. Sheriff Bianco not enforcing what the governor is saying.
Dialed in with decision makers.
Clarify what you actually meant.
Get the answers you need.
At the beginning of this, we were told, don't wear a mask. Is this really helping?
Expect a different kind of newscast. Fox 11 News Special Report. Weeknights at 7.